Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, as always, we have a real treat. Mr. Pat Van Abel is in the house, joining us today to talk a little bit about leadership and training. Pat is an entrepreneur, leader, and coach with over 30 years of experience. And just like you and I, Dustin, he's got 20 years of youth coaching experience. Also, EOS worldwide. You currently work in teaching servant leadership to businesses. Can't wait to dive into that topic. Pat, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys giving me a chance, and I'm excited to talk.
All right. So, Pat, we like to start these conversations out with a very simple question. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. Shortly after World War II, my dad took over a small place in Hollandtown called Van Abel Brothers. And it was simply a bar, a couple of hotel rooms upstairs, and a stable. And he knocked that down in 1946 and put up a supper club, bowling alleys, and a banquet hall. He and Mom ran that for 57 years. So was fully understood the whole entrepreneurial process, all the struggles, pains, successes. And shortly after I graduated from college in 1992, we opened up Badger State Mini Golf on the east side of Appleton on CE. And we turned that into two regional family entertainment centers in Appleton and Madison. The Madison or Middleton operation we ran from 1999 to 2011 before Meriter Hospital bought us out. And that was a great journey, a great exit for us. And Badger Sports Park, which was what we started our mini golf course. In 2006, we moved that to the north side of Appleton to our current location. And we just celebrated 30 years at Badger Sports Park. And I'm still a partner in that. And our original group still owns and operates that entity. So it's been a great ride. During that same time frame, when my dad was 82 years old, he thought he could or should think about retiring. And he did. And he always told us never to get in the food business. And then all of a sudden we were all in the food business because he didn't have an exit plan. So over the last 20 years, we've been running that. Shortly after taking over, we sadly shut those bowling alleys down and we added catering. And we were able to raise our top line by over 400%. So it's been a great ride. When I look at my journey in leadership and in entrepreneurial arena, I look at Mom and Dad, and they ran that business for 57 years. But I think if they were still alive today, they would look back and say they never had the time, honestly. So they never had the time freedoms, and they never had the financial freedoms for the incredible amount of roasted chicken and old fashions that they served and all the weddings. They look back and they, Mom and Dad they didn't have a lot. They're in coming out of the Great Depression. They were pretty used to that. But so they were selfless. So a lot of great lessons were learned over that time frame. And then 10 years ago-ish, I started leadership training, fell in love with servant leadership, and did business coaching workshops. And then a few years ago, I was introduced to something called EOS. Absolutely fell in love with the simplicity and power of that system. We started to run our own businesses on it, and it just changed the trajectory. I have, in that same time, became a professional EOS implementer, and now I get to pay that to other businesses that want more from their business. So it's just been a great ride. I don't know if that was too much information there, but that kind of recaps it.
Awesome. I think a lot of people who are from our area, which is Northeast Wisconsin, know the name Van Obels. And I think all of us are pretty fortunate to come from family business. I'm really curious, having grown up in a family business, you talk a lot about these life lessons. There are a lot of young individuals, young professionals that they spend maybe a couple years in it after college and they realize, yeah, maybe I don't want to live the lifestyle mom and dad did. I have a lot of friends that grew up in a similar lifestyle. What were some of those really hard life lessons that you learned? And I'm really curious of what inspired you to want to stick with it.
Mm. Yeah, it's just doing something for yourself. That would be one of the things that kept me in it. Dad was very well respected, and mom. And the team, they really had an incredible culture out there. It was really the heart of that small community and many small communities in the area. So a lot of people looked up to dad and mom. And so that was one of the things that made me think, oh man, that'd be cool to own your own business. The other side of it was, boy, making payroll every other Friday. I think mom and dad, and they still have about 100 paychecks that they cut every other week with the
Wow.
full-time and part-time team members out there. So I know there was a lot of uneasy nights on how are we going to make this balance, and they did a pile of weddings where people didn't have the money to pay them, and they always worked it out. Um, I think doing your own thing and having that control was probably kept me in it. And there was a lot of things I saw where dad was mopping floors and fixing toilets and just some of that stuff that wasn't as high profile that I certainly saw. And yeah, so that it was just a great journey. So a lot of takeaways, both plus and minus.
What's number
You
one
know,
in your
one
eyes?
So for me, the impact that dad, so he's been gone about 20, 21 years. The people that still come up to me and say, your dad gave me a chance and your dad gave me a second chance when people screwed up. Those type of stories, man, that's really powerful stuff. And we couldn't afford our wedding, and your dad let me pay me 6 months later, and all the fun that was had up there. I mean, so it was be able to build a team around you that you love and respect. Wasn't perfect by any means, nor was he or mom. So that for me, that's like just the relationship side of it, that you can make an impact on other people's lives. And we've tried to do that in some of the entities that we've gotten into over the years too.
I'm curious if I look at kind of the different stages from the restaurant business, which is an incredibly competitive, incredibly difficult business, to then going into the the entertainment space, the from the mini golf to the arcade games, things like that. Again, super competitive. You're trying to there's not a lot of organizations that have been able to make it work like you guys have. And then now kind of transitioning into leadership coaching, EOS, things like that. I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you think each of those built upon each other to kind of get you to where you are today? Because I think a lot of times people view their careers and their lives as a single direction. I can imagine 30 years ago, you probably weren't sitting here thinking, I'm going to be doing leadership coaching and training. And so, or maybe you did. So I'm curious, maybe just kind of how you felt that kind of each of those built upon each other to get where you are today.
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed coaching. And I think one of the pieces to the entrepreneurial puzzle that I figured out with a lot of help from others was that we all serve two markets. And I don't care what widget you make or service that you deliver, we as a business owner or as a leader in an organization, we have to serve the people that make the widget at a very high level, and we have to serve the people that buy the widget or the service. They are equally as important. And what we found was, and I learned this from dad and mom, was getting the people first the output of that is going to be, you know, a product. And so it was always people first. And then the product was secondary. The profit is simply a byproduct of the healthy relationships that you have. So to me, serving those two markets was always people first. If you don't get the people right, I don't care what your widget is, you're going to struggle. If you don't have the right people in the right seats, it's going to be tough to deliver and compete. If you get the people right and you can align some fun with the value you're trying to create, I think you can compete anywhere with anyone. And we found that we don't even look at our competition. We don't think about them. We got to get our stuff right in house. Out in Hollandtown, it was making, great chicken and good old fashions. When it was, at Badger Sports Park, we were starting to hand out putters back in 1993. And I said, that's not enough. And I'm like, so we had a PA system. And all of a sudden I'm like, we should ask trivia questions while they're mini golfing. And so we said, all right, the person with the correct answer to the following trivia question, you can come up here. And Burger King was down the road and Van Abel's was further down the road. Be like, you can win a free chicken dinner from Van Abel's if you get this question right. So we'd ask those questions. People would come running in. We'd always tell them not to run through the mini golf course, but that was fell on deaf ears. But people would come running in, and I'd see people, at the dentist or wherever. And hey, we went mini golf. How was it? He goes, oh, it was great, but I got the trivia question right. So it's always been about the additional touches you can put in to your widget and your service, where it's authentic and they think that they believe that you really care. And if you really care about your team, it comes out in the widget or your service. And then I just think if you get the team thing right, your ability to service the people that are buying your product or service, you're gonna compete and hopefully thrive or survive.
When I hear you talk about that, one of my takeaways was you got to do the little things right. And I think if you look internally and you take care of your people first, you have what they call that people first initiative. I think not only your family, but your team will do the little things to take care of the customers. And that's when it all comes back to you. But taking one more step back from that, when you're working with businesses today, how often do you find that they are not doing the little things?
Yeah. So they become very reactionary. The world is very dynamic around us, regardless of what you do, what type of business you're in. So it's always very dynamic, and you can become very reactive. The discipline and some of the things we talked about before going on air today was, the habits that, good business owners build is, I got to get out of working in the business. We all do it. And sometimes it's very important, but man, we got to get above the tree, above the jungle, and look down and say, we're going to work on the business. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the ability to pull out of that and take leadership with you and say, okay, guys and gals, we got to get working on the business rather than stuck in working in the business. And I would look back in Hollandtown at mom and dad. They were very guilty of working in the business too much, not working on it, where they could focus on personal and financial freedoms, holding some family members accountable over the years. So, family business is far from perfect. But that ability to work above and on the business is so darn important. It's an intentional act and an act of discipline to do it.
I'm curious, you're doing training, doing leadership training, obviously led a lot of successful businesses, leading with people. What drove you to EOS? I mean, Gino Wickman's book is awesome, and I know that's what it's based on. We use it in a variety of different ways in our businesses as well. But just curious, what led you to that, and to not only just engage in it, but to take the level of wanting to now be an implementer and share that with others.
So I have done a lot. I've done a lot of keynotes. I've done workshops, trainings. And what I felt was people could get a nugget or two, and that's awesome. You get done as the speaker, you drop the mic, and people are hopefully pretty excited, because when you talk about servant leadership, it's really, a lot of it is, well, no duh. I mean, be patient, be helpful, be humble. We can all say, oh yeah, all right. So hopefully you deliver some nuggets that really resonate with them. But my fear was, and even Jim Hunter, who wrote the book The Servant, which has really got me down that path, you'd get done with a keynote, and 6 months later, oh yeah, we saw that leadership guy, and what was our maybe he had something that really resonated, but I didn't feel like it was sticky enough to truly make impact. So then 4 years ago, a guy by the name of Jamie Budiak is over at Sure Dry Basement Systems, and he said to me, hey, you should check out this EOS. I'm like, what the heck is EOS? So he started to share with me and what the concept of rocks, which is a Stephen Covey term. And I'm like, oh, wow, that seems pretty intuitive and pretty simple. So I started to consume it at that point in time. And I just well, this is where you could really drive long-term sustainable impact. As long as those people stick to those habits, that sit there right in front of them. If, for example, inside of EOS, the 90-minute L10 weekly meeting, that meeting pulse is so darn important. There's so much more to it than that. But if to me, it was much more sticky, and I thought I could really drive long-term lasting impact, and not knocking, whatever we can deliver inside of a keynote or a workshop. But to me, that just felt like the next step for me.
So when you talk a lot about these,
Right, Chris.
go ahead. When you talk a lot about working with these clients and these small businesses, what do you see is some of the most reoccurring issues? Because I'm guessing with small to medium-sized businesses, a lot of it's the same, regardless of industry.
Yep. So we'll ask them about their vision. And if we would pull we don't do this, but if we pulled everybody into a separate room and said, well, where are you going and how do you plan to get there? Let's say in a year, let's say in 3 years and 10 years. Sadly, most of them are going to give you a different answer. There's never a shortage of vision. It's just they don't necessarily agree or have discussed on where are we going and how do we plan to get there. And when inside of EOS, that's the first piece we always look at is we got to get the vision piece right. So it's getting everybody 100% on the same page about who we are at our core, what we love to do and are best at, where we're going, and how we plan to get there. So that's what sets the vision component up inside of EOS. And then the 6 key components of EOS, it's hard to lay this all out on a podcast, but visually, the vision, it's a pie-shaped model. And vision's at the top. The next one we always go is to the people component. And the people component, if you don't have great people, you can't execute a great vision. And the issue is everybody defines great people differently, from Collins and Covey, the hedgehog concept, the A players, superstars, top quartile. So what we do is we help them identify what does a great person look like in their organization, people that consistently exhibit those core values. Once we've established what great people in that organization are, then we're like, well, we got to get the right people in the right seats. So those are the 2 most intensive areas of need: vision and people. So like I said before, people first. Get the right people, get them in the right seats. We got to have both. And then we go over in the model, and I'll go through this real quick. But the other side of this is we go to the data component, because we got to start running the business. A lot of entrepreneurs fall into the trap where it's the running on hunches, feelings, fears, where we're like, we got to start running the business on data. So we're like, what are the 5 to 15 numbers that drive the pulse of your business? From there, once you strengthen the vision component, the people component, and the data component, then that really starts to get clarity and transparency in the organization. Then we look at the issues component. And great companies are really good at identifying their issues at the root and coming up with a plan of action to make them go away forever. And we bounce over to, and I'm going through this pretty quick, but then we go to the process component, which is, all right, team, what does this company need to do the right and best? What are the most important things this company does so that we get it done the right and best way every single time, or at least to the best of our ability? And to the extent that we can strengthen the process component, it does two very important things. It helps us become more consistent, and then it becomes scalable. And I look at our friends at Quick Trip, for example, and you say, man, you go into these Quick Trips or McDonald's, and they're so darn consistent. They deliver a pretty good experience every single time. And I drive right by all these other great gas stations with my little Quick Trip credit card, and I'm going right by all these other competitors, and I've completely forgot about everybody else that sells gas. So it creates consistency and scalability. The final piece at the bottom of the puzzle is called traction. And that's that book that you mentioned before, Dustin. It's about getting your vision down to the ground and gaining traction. One of the humorous things we say in the EOS implementation world is, vision without traction is really hallucination. And that's really it. And the disciplines down in the traction component I mentioned before, which is rocks. We're like, all right, team, what are the most important things that we need to do in the next 90 days? And that's the term rock. That comes from Stephen Covey. And we really focus on that. We create that 90-day world. The next thing we do, I mentioned earlier, which is that meeting pulse. How frequently do the circles need to touch? Then amongst all the circles in your organization. And we say it's about 90 minutes a week where we're like, leadership team, let's get above the business. And are we on track? Are we off track? And we look at rocks, and we look at that data measurable piece I mentioned. And we just know if we're on track or off track. That is a really quick flyover of the EOS model.
What's up, listeners? It's your co-host, Chris here. And I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of the Hustle Nation. We really appreciate all of you for listening, downloading, and reviewing the show. We know our listeners are all about achieving their dreams and big success. But if you've ever felt like you're just inches away from your dreams, like just something's missing, well, we've launched a new product called the Hustle Planner. It's not just a planner, it's your personal roadmap to success. The Hustle Planner was designed to help you break free from unfulfilled dreams. It's not just about listing tasks, it's like sculpting your future on paper, setting bold goals, tracking progress, and even finding a bit of daily joy. The Hustle Planner was designed to eliminate the burden of stress and anxiety, to give you a direction to better understand yourself, what's working and what's not. It was really designed for people like you and me to help stack victories on a daily basis. And if you win each day, you win the week. And when you win the weeks, you win the month. And if you can stack that kind of success month over month, quarter over quarter, you will then win the year. And we know when you do that, you will start building the momentum and success and confidence you know you're capable of. So if you're looking for a small edge and you want to start building momentum now, head over to Amazon or click the link in the show notes below. And for a small investment and a small commitment, you can make a huge impact in your personal and professional life.
One of the things I've seen with just talking to a lot of businesses that have done EOS, one of the things that you kind of alluded to this is its simplicity of working on the business. But as you've gone into businesses, I can imagine as you've started with them, they're in all different phases. So, I know as we went through kind of our process, this was, almost a decade ago now, but, when you first start that shift from having a chunk of people working in the business to working on the business on some regular cadence, whatever that is, whether they're using EOS or some other structure, but just that exercise of consistently lifting above. I'm curious, what have you seen as ways to get people to buy into that concept? Because, I'm going to use the example of, I've never run a restaurant before, right? But, if you're running a restaurant and, somebody shows up and wants to have food, you got to serve them food. You can't let that wait. And, finding and I feel like that's why so many business leaders fall into that trap of getting stuck in the business versus, working on the business. Just curious, like, what have you seen to get people to realize what that right balance is, how to pull themselves out of the day-to-day stuff when they need to really advance their organization forward?
So I'm just trying to understand your question. So can you rephrase that?
Yeah.
Dustin?
So anytime I walked into an organization that's making this shift, right? Kind of going from when businesses are very small and super entrepreneurial, they start with, frankly, the leader is in the business and there's no other way around it because they might be the only
Yep.
person in the business. So,
Right.
it has to start very tactical, very on the ground. And what I've seen is a lot of organizations that have grown from that. They reach a point, and maybe it's a $500,000 in revenue, maybe it's $1 million in revenue, maybe it's a number of employees, but they reach that point where they no longer can scale because they're stuck in the business.
Yep.
And what I've seen EOS is a platform that allows people to step out of the business at some level to start, so they can work on the business instead of in. I'm just curious, like, how do you get people over that hump? Because I think that's where so many people stagnate from a business perspective, is getting stuck in that wrong balance.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. So when people join us in the EOS journey, the first meeting we have with them is called Focus Day. And what we do in EOS is we really want them to get some traction first and some enlightenment about how they hit the ceiling, which is a very natural occurrence for every business. No business grows in a straight line. Every business is going to grow. We call it the evolution. They keep evolving. And all of a sudden they're like, ugh, we're stuck. And three things can happen at that point in time where they're stuck. They can flatline, which they're going to stay very stagnant. They can retreat, and many businesses fail when they hit ceilings, their inability to grow, their inability to meet the challenges of the market, or they can break through that ceiling. And what we do in Focus Day is we help them with 5 leadership abilities. And the first thing we do is we help them simplify everything, because the business is very complex. Because in a small business, the owner might sit on many seats. The owner might sit in all of the seats. But if they're going to grow their business, their ability to simplify, the next thing we ask them to do is, we teach them how they can delegate. So their ability to delegate so that they can elevate. Those are some of the fundamentals that we use to help them break through the ceiling. So, we simplify, we delegate, we systemize, and then the systemize is part of that meeting cadence, like you mentioned. All right, we have to have the discipline to start, even on very small levels, to start working on the business where we get out of it. We get out of the building. So many of these business owners, they go in there and they just react, and they're just going to try to make the hamburger. And boy, if they want to take that next step, they have to do some different things. And so we talk about hitting the ceiling, and we achieve that with them understanding all the seats that they sit in, where could they best serve themselves and the greater good of the company by starting to bring more help in. And that's a very scary thought for cash-strapped businesses. Our job is to teach them what things they should delegate. Those very mundane tasks. My dad was guilty of, he'd be in there washing glasses on a Monday morning. And I'm like, Dad, there's so many people you could have do that differently, but his passion was all in on the business every day, and I can do everything. And he believed in people, but just didn't get enough feedback to say, boy, there's a better way to do it. So we teach those leadership abilities. And so the accountability chart, the rocks, the meeting pulse, and that scorecard are all covered when we start the journey So we help them break through those ceilings that they naturally hit.
Pat, what's harder for a lot of your clients? Is it delegating at first, or I can imagine building a system, but then, I mean, anybody can build a system, but it's the follow through and actually leveraging that. So how do you implement? But is it systemize or is it delegate? What's harder for them?
the Typically, when you start to delegate, you have to bring people on, and we have the conversation a lot. We need more sales. So as an example, that's something we hear a lot. We need more sales, and like, well, if I go out and if I hire salesmen and they go out and start generating more sales, I don't have the infrastructure or the ability to produce that product or service. I don't have the money to do it. And what we help them do is understand the concurrent effort. They got to believe in themselves. They got to believe in the people around them that, yep, we're going to start to generate more sales, but I have to build a bicycle, a bigger framed bicycle chassis that can handle all of the additional work that's going to be there. So we start to help. So I think that's the larger challenge, is understanding the growth. They can't do everything anymore. So that ability to delegate, at least initially, is the first big hurdle. Like, well, I just can't afford to hire anybody to do that. Then you might be stuck there for a long time. And your inability to meet what the market needs, you may end up in real trouble. The ability to systemize comes a little bit later, when they say, well, I have enough of the right people in the right seats. Now let's look at those core processes and our ability to do the most important things in our business the right and best way every time. Our ability to deliver that can now and refine those processes regularly. Say, is there a better way for us to build that widget? Then that they can start to hit new levels. But initially, Chris, I would say it's the ability to see the need to delegate and believe in yourself to hire the person to do it.
Some of what I'm hearing you say is just comes down to mindset. To believe in yourself and to believe in your system, your company, and your people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When people say to us, well, what is this EOS thing? And we'll say, well, the first thing is clarifying. And, in that clarity and that transparency, you're looking in the mirror and you say, boy, we deliver a pretty good product. Okay, we want to grow. And if I look around and I have a team, we always talk about vision, traction, and healthy. So vision, I talked about before. Where are we going and how do we plan to get there? Traction is about instilling the discipline and accountability. So no matter where I go in your organization, I'm going to see people executing on the vision we all talked about. And the final piece is healthy. And that's so that we're a functional, cohesive, fun-loving group that we enjoy being around. When you have that, I think that builds confidence. And to me, confidence is the biggest part of this, that, yep, I'm going to go to the banker and I'm going to ask for a bigger line of credit. We're going to go to the larger space. We're going to hire more people. So to me, those are some of the fundamentals early on, but it's driven by confidence. And if your leadership team is healthy, that you trust each other, that you love each other, you're going to have, you're not going to be afraid of conflict. You're going to hold each other accountable. You're going to go enjoy each other and celebrate the victories. So it's a larger effort, but it starts with trust at the leadership team level. We got to be healthy.
The concept of organizational health, I think, is interesting in today's world. So many people are talking about culture and, what that means. And, to me, the organizational health, I think, puts a very different layer on the word culture. Because in the end of the day, every organization has a culture, whether it's good or bad. and so it's not really about, do you have culture? It's what is that? And then therefore, what is true organizational health? And, some of that, I think a lot of times when people think about culture, it's all about the niceties. Here's all the fun loving parts of culture, but there's also the accountability piece, right? Like when you talk about the traction of everybody going in the same direction, everyone accountable to their spot. while having fun and while engaged and while seeing what's their mission and what's their role and how do they fill up to the top. But I think to me, that's such an interesting twist, the organizational health element, because I think it puts a very different lens on people. What our head of HR, we have a quote that we use from her all the time. She says, ping pong tables and food trucks isn't culture, because a lot of people try to masquerade candidly an organization that isn't healthy, and they try to masquerade it by beanbag chairs and bright colors on the wall and things like that. But that's not really what drives it.
Right. Yeah. What we say is, as the leadership team goes, so goes the rest of the organization. And it's a lot of people are okay holding their direct reports accountable, but holding the peers at your leadership level accountable is a bigger weakness in most organizations, where they're just not, I'm the head of ops, and the head of marketing is just clearly not, performing as they've said, according to the plan, and they let it slide. Yet their reports, they would be very comfortable having those conversations. We have found at the leadership team level that they're just not holding each other accountable at that level. And even the smallest fissure, crack at that level can become a canyon, because people see it, and they see when there's not cohesion at the leadership level, the senior leadership level. So our term is the integrator, and that's the person that orchestrates everybody on that leadership team. And there's even another seat we call the visionary, which I'm a classic visionary, not great at the day-to-day stuff. But that integrator's role is to harmonize and orchestrate that way that leadership team plays and tries to achieve the vision. So for us, gotta get the leadership team level, healthy, starting with trust. We're not afraid of conflict. We're going to hold each other accountable. We're going to love each other. And the funny thing is, on those teams, they're going to have very rigorous debate, but it on really healthy teams, it never becomes personal. And when they've reached, everybody wants to be heard. So that's another thing we talk about, that the organizational health piece. Everybody at senior leadership needs to be heard. Yep. Oh, they heard me. Oh, we're going to go in a different direction. Got it, boss. We're all marching in the same direction, but everybody's been heard. And then you have a unified team. Then virally, that can start to make its way into the other leadership teams in your organization. And then ultimately to the frontline team members. So it starts at the senior leadership level, building that culture piece there before you'll ever get it to the frontline team members.
I love that conversation around healthy conflict, because so many people in the world today are conflict avoidant, and they're scared of it. They don't know how to deal with it, or they just don't know how to have positive, productive conversation. And there was a book I read recently called Think Again by Adam Grant, which was phenomenal. Highly recommend that for anybody out there. But it got people thinking about the benefits of conflict and how it can be positive to have a debate. And typically, people have debates because they're passionate about it. And when they're passionate about something, they want what's best. And so I'm just curious how often that comes up. And is there anything else that you use to get people to embrace some of that healthy conflict?
So one of the tools we use at the EOS annual is something we call the one thing. And the one thing exercise is about helping people understand their blind spots. This is at the senior leadership level. And if I was going to talk to Dustin, I would share something that, if you could ask Dustin one thing that he should start or stop doing, and we say on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a layup, 10 being this is like really tough feedback, we see this at about a 7. But we're going to share something. I'm going to look Dustin in the eye at the annual meeting, and I'm going to say, Dustin, one thing you need to start doing, or one thing you need to stop doing, is blank. And it's delivered from a position of care and love. And it's well within the bounds of what we're doing as a team. And then Dustin's going to hear that from everybody on that leadership team. And everybody's going to hear that same piece of feedback. And that person, Dustin, will internalize that. And then he's going to make a statement before we wrap up that annual. It says, all right, for 2024, the one thing that I see that, and we have to be open-minded when we hear this. And I'll take one of those pieces of feedback. Boy, for 2024, I'm really going to blank. And then we're going to revisit that on our quarterlies. We're going to say, how are you doing on your one thing? This is just an example, but this is how we build trust at that most senior leadership level. So I always get a little long-winded. I apologize, guys, but I'm not sure if I was on target with that exact ask, but that, to us, that's a tool that we use to really help people just break down that, be vulnerable with their teams and each other. Because you hit it on the head, Chris. Number one failure in leadership is conflict avoidance. And the first job in leadership is to remove fear. And if we're fearful of people on that senior leadership team, we're never going to be open, honest. We're not going to give the feedback that we want. We're never going to be committed to the decisions that were reached at the leadership level. So that all comes from Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The book's been around a long, long time. Those fundamentals never change. So that's how we really zero in on building trust at the senior leadership level, as one example.
That was a phenomenal answer. That is not something I have ever done or ever practiced. And I'm always interested in tactics because for many, many years, just personally, I had struggled with that. And I think there's a lot of people out there that do not like conflict. Some people are good at it. Like I know a few people who actually thrive in arguments, or let's call them debates to be kind. But unfortunately, due to time, we have to wrap this up, Pat. It's a conversation we could probably talk about for hours. But outside of the stuff that we've talked about already, what is one more thing that maybe you haven't mentioned that you think our audience could benefit from? A good final thought to walk away with.
You bet. I'll go back to servant leadership. Our ability to identify and meet needs is, if somebody put me in a corner and said, hey, what's servant leadership? Our ability to identify and meet needs, and that's a skill. Our ability to read the room, to serve people. And the number one thing that hampers that is when people, they feel like they don't belong. I'm not blank enough, whatever that might be. There's so much happens outside of work that affects what goes on at work. And there's so much that happens inside of work that affects what goes on at home and in the rest of our lives. So to me, servant leadership, organizational health is about that concurrent journey that we take as individuals and that we take as people, as part of an organization. So it's a journey that we take, an inward and outward journey, inside of work, outside of work. It all matters and it all counts. So to me, that's probably one of the biggest things I deliver.
I love that because I do think that, especially for those who have been in a leadership role for a long time, or those who maybe are a business owner and they've gotten comfortable, and there's a lot of us out there who get complacent from time to time, whether you want to admit it or not.
Yep.
And I do think that even the best of us don't see it as the ability to identify and meet their needs. Sometimes we're not looking. And I think that that's a wonderful reminder, because we need to flip that switch, have that reminder and say, I need to be more aware. I need to be looking for those things. And I think that's a wonderful trait of a great leader. So thank you for joining us today, Pat. Before I let you go, I would like to have you just tell the audience where they can find you, where they can find your EOS business, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Awesome. So my business coaching practice is called Servant Cultures. So if you go to pat@servantcultures.com, you can drop me an email there. You can find my phone number. And I'd love to have that conversation with people that are stuck or they want more for their business. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me.
And while we're at it, let's plug the other local businesses, as much as they may not be in leadership. If you happen to be in Northeast Wisconsin, don't forget to check these great businesses out. Appleton X, Badger Sports Park.
Appleton X, Badger Sports Park, West Bend Axe and Escape, Menominee Falls Axe and Escape, Bubble Fresh Laundry, in Kaukauna. So yeah, and Van Abel's is been just a tremendous honor to be a part of, and I'm so lucky to be born in that. We're all so lucky. We have our health, we have great relationships. So yeah, thank you for bringing those up.
Yeah, well, as a fellow entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, I guess is what people call me, I love to respect the opportunity to promote all of your businesses because they're all equally important. And I think they've all helped you get to where you are now. And just you're a wealth of knowledge with all of your leadership and business experience. And I think that anytime we, as podcast hosts or listeners of the podcast, can learn from someone like that, we are all open-minded and open ears. And I hope that everyone out there listening is the same. Every day is a new opportunity to get better and improve. And for those of you listening, thank you so much for your ears, for the downloads. We appreciate you. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.